First, always want to say thank you to Deborah, Michael, and GSV crew that make these very special gatherings possible, and there's nothing else like it really in the world. I was talking with this distinguished group, and we're not going to do bios because they're all, as GSV does very well, they're all in your programs online, and so if you want to learn more about these folks, and they're all accessible. The one change in the program was Saurabh couldn't be here. There was a family health issue, so we're sending him good, healthy thoughts, and we were able to get Adeel, who's a wonderful visionary doing cool stuff that we're going to talk about. I'd want to start because this is all about things that are moving fast, and Lev has probably heard me do this one too many times, but does anyone here know, and it sort of ties into Michael's slides this morning, 10/29/69. So on Sunday, it's an important anniversary for the world. Most people say man on the moon. What is the first connection of the internet? And it was a moment at UCLA, our friends at UCLA, Leonard Kleinrock and company were connecting up to Stanford, and it was one of those kind of funny historic moments. They typed in login, they typed in LO, and it crashed. So the first word in internet history was low. So with that, we have a distinguished group of folks here, and we wanted to begin the discussion and also think a little bit about, we're hearing a lot about stuff here in the US, and I think there's a lot that I want to kick in, starting with Jessica about around the world, because post-pandemic, things have been put on steroids. And yes, we're hearing a lot about AI today, and we're going to want to talk about that. I would start with, what are the most significant barriers to the adoption of the kind of technologies that can transform teaching and learning in practical ways? And again, I say practical because everyone in this room has seen lots of shiny lights. And Deborah and Michael and the GSV team, they see lots of stuff where you ask, can you quantify with efficacy and research, does it work? Is it scalable and is it sustainable? And how often, Deborah, does that happen? Not so much, right? And so we're here about practical stuff, but I thought maybe with that question, what are you seeing around the world? And maybe weave in a little bit about your life story and how you are thinking about technology. All in 15 seconds.
All right, I'll pick up on this important date, October 29th. I actually started out my career as an intern at the FCC with the job that they thought nobody cared about, which is how to regulate this whole internet thing. And here I am, many, many years later. And I think the title of this Better, Faster, Cheaper, I think we've all learned in this room that is really up for debate in all of the evolutions of technology that we've been through, and this is really no exception for us. I spend most of my time in that 15,000 hours that Michael showed before on the gaming side, really around how are we empowering creators and future creators to enter into this fast-paced economy and access economic opportunity. And so what we're seeing in all over the world are these incredible pockets of innovation, from Seoul, South Korea, to Dakar, Senegal, to Pakistan, to Louisiana, to Toronto. And these pockets of innovation have one thing in common, which is that they bring together the intersection of workforce, employers, universities, and incredible educators who are the glue that make it all happen. And so what I think is most exciting to me with the evolution of AI, immersive experiences, 5G, the list goes on, cloud, is that we are finally seeing these silos breaking down in these pockets around the world that are creating massive breakthroughs in economic mobility.
So maybe, and again, I'm thinking about the US unusual. We have this panel, and again, it was great. GSV said, let's do the K-20 piece. So this is K-12, this is higher ed, this is workforce. You have someone like Ulrik who's been thinking about stuff. He's a doctor. He's been thinking about this stuff for decades, both on the K-5 space, on the career training space. Tell us lessons learned that we're taking into 2023, and isn't this a unique I keep hearing it. I know we've had all these false starts historically, but this feels like an inflection point coming out of COVID and with the AI piece. Tell us the reality check from your viewpoint.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, it's interesting because you should think that. You don't know how many times people have said, "Oh, you guys must have been doing really, really well during COVID and after COVID." But to your first question is, what is that really holds us back? It's like, who really cares about whether education works? I've been going back and forth with Tony Wagner, whom I'm writing a book with right now, trying to figure out how do we define what mastery learning is, like learning that works, learning that matters, like, and the editors keep coming back saying, like, it's still not clear enough. Maybe we'll get there one day and the book will be published, at least basic, otherwise has a problem. But the fundamental problem is, who cares about whether education works? And I think that is the biggest challenge we had, both during COVID. We just needed something, right? Because everybody had the excuse that we needed something too fast. We needed something because the alternative was worse. But we're going into a phase right now where it's actually changing, I think, and I hope that it will be changing. And there is two things happening at the same time. First, I think the fact that everybody are now scared about, like, never miss a good crisis, right? But everybody is scared about what will generative AI do to education. I'm on the board of a major university in Europe, and it's top mind on their agenda, but they don't know why exactly. They just heard about it somewhere, right? They don't know what the impact will be on education, but I think that helps. I think something that happens at the same time, which is it's both generating the crisis, but it's also going to give some of the answers to how we're going to get through this, which is we are going to profoundly change the cost structure of delivering education as of before. And then you can say, but why the heck are we interested in that? That it's going away, right? No, it's not. This is my big interest, and it's been my big interest for 25 years, is the interaction between knowledge and skills. Knowledge is not going to go away. Just because you can find things and ask ChatGPT about everything, that's not the role of humans in the future. It's actually what we can do with what we know, how we can ask even better questions to it. And a lot of people think the same way as they've done with everything since laser discs in the 80s, being like, wow, there is this general technology, let's use it in education. Anybody got their lives changed by laser discs? Nobody, right? Or CD-ROMs, right? We can keep going. So it's a matter of how do we figure out ways to build domain-specific things like the super technology in education on top of these things. And if we combine those two things happening at the same time, the scare that people might be a little bit more prone to actually looking at, does learning really works? What is the science behind it? What does it really mean that it works? And at the same time, they're able to change the cost structure of solving that fundamental problem that we both need to learn more of the traditional stuff. In some ways, there are also lots of facts you can forget about, but you really need to learn more, probably. It's only been going one way through 4 industrial revolutions. We need to possess more in here. But we also need to learn some new things, which is the 7 C's or whatever we end up calling them. So I think the good news is that there is a good chance now, but it's not COVID that helped. It's probably the few things that are happening right now at the same time.
So maybe it's a good intro for Josh, for those, again, I expect that you folks have looked at. Josh has a long storied career in ed tech and education, and his most recent incarnation, he's all in on something called Dreamscape Learn. And maybe taking what Ulrik just talked about, and I know that our friends, I see Phil out there, and so ASU has made a significant investment, just not on shiny things. But Phil's shop, Action Lab, has been quantifying it. And does it work? And so are we at this inflection point with Dreamscape?
Well, we're just getting started, and I think we've seen really quite astonishing results in the things that we've done at ASU, and it's exciting. But I think the part of what we're doing that I think is sort of most unusual and maybe most important and most indicative of an inflection point sort of comes back to something that I thought was great about Mike Mo's opening talk today, and the fact that it was called What's Love Got to Do with It, which is that I think in our industry we often forget that we're in the engagement business, and we've spent a lot of time, energy, and money on very worthwhile things, thinking of ourselves as being in the feedback business. And so adaptive platforms and intelligent tutoring systems, and a lot of thought about what people should learn and all that has done a lot of good. But I think we often forget sort of two things. One, that we have an audience that we have to find a way to make lean in to what they're doing in school. And I'll come back to that in a second. And there are some often, I think, sort of unintended consequences to being in what I'm calling the feedback business. That most of us, either, maybe not all, but most of us were kind of good at school, or at least liked school, had some success in school, and a lot of the students we're trying to reach, that's not where they start from. And when the systems that we build are really skilled at, or sort of sophisticated at, showing individual students in individualized ways the exact way in which they are not getting it, it sends a message to students who aren't sure who they are with respect to school and learning, that like, this, you're wrong. We can help you get a little bit more right, but you're wrong. And I think we haven't done enough to sort of figure out how do we get students sort of launching into educational experiences from a place of, I want to be a part of this, this is super exciting, it's thrilling, before they even get to the learning stuff. So from a technology point of view, what I think is interesting about this moment, and that at least as it relates to what I do for work, is the immersive technologies that are emerging are ones that I think allow us to take students to places we could not possibly have taken them before in incredibly rich and compelling and realistic ways. And whether that's to museums they could never possibly visit, to a fantastical intergalactic wildlife sanctuary, or inside an atom, it's a way of getting the classroom to not be the conventional classroom, and to capture students' imagination in ways that I think the tools that we've used until now were much, much more limited.
I think you'll hear from all the panelists the word engagement and then the word storytelling. I always say that we don't have education problems in America or the world as much as we have communications problems. And so, when I'm thinking about things that are breaking out for Adeel, let's just do a quick quiz. So his space, so we have different audiences. We have students, we have educators, we have administrators, we have K-12, we have higher ed, so Adeel is focusing on, he was a principal in Colorado. He's got something very exciting in terms of MagicSchool. Anyone want to take a guess? So his focus is on AI for educators. How many folks do you think, how many educators in the last 5 months do you think have joined up his brigade in terms of AI for educators? Anybody, any thoughts? 100, 1,000? Do I hear 5,000? Deborah, could we get we'll have a bidding thing. The answer is, because I won't waste time because Deborah will start staring at me, it's 500,000. So that's a lean into welcome, and share with us about, because it does feel like you've got a lot of collective, individual and collective throw weight in the room. It does feel like this is an inflection point. Tell us how you're seeing it from the front lines.
Yeah, so I can start with how MagicSchool, the idea from MagicSchool, from the inception, is actually, I think, illustrative of the AI sector in general. And so I'm a former teacher and principal by training, a lifelong teacher and principal, and I started MagicSchool when I was on a sabbatical, came back from some travel, came back in November, December of last year. ChatGPT had changed the world. I've always been technology curious, and I was tinkering with ChatGPT, and the first thing that I thought was, wow, there's so much utility here for teachers. This would have saved me so much time. I would have been using this every day when I was a teacher and a principal. So I started calling around, AI was in all of the headlines, and I called my former colleagues at the school that I founded, and I was like, what's going on with ChatGPT? This is amazing. Have you seen it? And the answer was, nothing's going on. And the only chatter about ChatGPT happening right now is the chatter about how are students going to use this to cheat. There are a couple English teachers whose students have clearly turned in ChatGPT written essays, but in terms of how it can help us, a profession known for burnout, a profession known for a shortage, wasn't even on the radar of all the folks I talked to. And I worked in pretty progressive schools that were technology forward. So I did what a principal would do. I went out to my old school, and I led a training. I led a professional development session on ChatGPT. I said, this is what ChatGPT is. This is how to use it responsibly. Here's some ethical considerations before we use it. Let me demonstrate it for you. I'm gonna give you a couple high leverage use cases, things that I think would help you in your world. the first time you see generative AI used productively, it's like a wow moment. It's, oh my goodness, jaws on the floor, this is incredible. So I thought I'd done something really great for my old school, and I gave them homework. I said, I'm gonna come back in a week, I wanna hear all the ways that you use this in your work now that you understand how to use it. Came back a week later and started asking around, for the folks who were there, how are you using ChatGPT? This must have changed your world. And we already see some people who know the end of the story, and the answers were, well, I got to it and I just kind of forgot what to do. I was like, even though I showed it to you and we did it together, they're like, yeah, I just didn't use it. Then there was the second part of, I got to it, I tried to do what you showed me how to do, and it just didn't quite come out right, and I was trying to get it to work right, and I just gave up and did it myself because that would have been faster. And then there was a third layer, which were just I have 20 different ways I use this. This is so cool. And that was the smallest percentage of people. So I was like, okay, how are we going to shortcut people to getting to use AI in schools? And the answer wasn't training. I just tried that. It failed. So what the idea came about, which was Magic School, and I think it was demoed earlier today, was this idea of let's capture all the greatest ways that educators can use generative AI, put them in one place, make them super easy to use, control for really high quality outputs, and let's see if it works. And I have no software background, but I was resourceful, got some folks together, and 5 months ago we launched Magic School, which was a series of 5 or 6 tools that could help teachers. 5 months later, we have 500,000 users, and it's really struck a chord with educators because it solves problems for them, right? So when you can have generative AI solve a specific problem, the problem in education is very clearly a capacity problem. There's never been enough capacity in public schools, so this solves a little bit of that capacity problem. It starts, there's a value proposition here for a singular educator, and we hope districts in the future. But I think that's where we start is generative AI. The sexiest use cases to me are why aren't we using generative AI at the VA? And getting people through the medical care they need, and using AI to have agents that process paperwork. Why aren't we using it in these spaces that really have practical implications, and doing it for tasks that are things that we know it can do well? And some of these things are crises. The teacher shortage is a crisis. So we can't wait for AI to be perfect. We need to implement it now, and we need to start getting our folks acclimated with it and using it and having it work in their world meaningfully. And illustrative to the broader point, and I'm sorry for taking so much time here, but the last thing is that most people talk about ChatGPT being the fastest growing technology ever, the most signups ever, those kinds of things. I would venture to guess that there is maybe 1 or 2 or 3% of those users who've actually used ChatGPT for productive purposes. Most people go to it, they get the novelty out of it, just like I did when I did my training, and they never return to it. So it's how are we going to build this technology in a way that is really practically solving problems for us in ways that people can work into their workflows? I think that's the next stage of this technology, and one that we're focused on building, but I think that applies to just about any space.
So I'm thinking, again, there's so much going on here, and again, it's a tough discussion because we're talking K-20 and we're talking everything. But when I'm hearing about these gating items, when people talk about public education, it's well, it's complicated, yeah, and it's 14,000 CEOs, and they've got their elected school boards, and there's 50 state superintendents, and they have all these standards. For the group here, whether it's K-12, higher ed, there's the wholesale and retail market. There's straight to the students, and then there is through the districts or through the higher ed institutions. Talk to us what the expectations, because expectations and realities of higher ed administrators, K-12 administrators, they look for the fixes, and there has to be a business model behind it, but there's got to be a pedagogical model that you can quantify. Just curious about how does this room and everyone here deal with wholesale meets retail and that sort of reality. I mean, I told them just before here, I've got 50 superintendents I got to talk with tomorrow in LA, just in that region, and they've brought in their lawyers to talk about AI all day. And it's going to be that administrative side of the house. Meanwhile, their teachers are there, their students are there. So maybe the wholesale and retail side of the house.
I have no idea. Only because I mean, the way that I look at this is what are the creators, what are the young people or old people, what formerly were known as the learners used to do. I mean, I think the key theme that's happened with this continuing explosion and exponential growth of technology is that the roles have totally blurred. The consumer is now the creator, and vice versa. The teacher and the learner are continuing to blur as well. And I think you're seeing this not just across education, but across every industry, because AI is really empowering the agency of the human that's using this to drive forward. But I will, all that to say, we can continue the wholesale retail perspective for people who are more, I think, in the industry.
And by the way, Jessica's current expertise, a lifelong of expertise, games. And so again, like there's a stunning number that Jessica, you got to share it with the audience. So I was at something, I'm focusing a lot on media literacy, and everyone's, we got to change it through films and TV and music. Do you want to share the revenue of the film and TV and music industry versus games?
I can do film and music because TV is changing as we speak because of the strike. But yeah, film and music is about 1/10 the size of the gaming industry. Gaming is 200 to 250 billion, depending on how you measure it. Just for the work that we do, we have millions of creators who create their experiences, like Josh has, to about 4.5 billion consumers. And so that's the data and the AI and immersive technology that we're seeing all of this be running on right now. And that's where I'm kind of gathering, like, here's how these roles are changing. This is no longer about, like, we are going to publish learning experiences to individuals or gaming experiences. Those individuals are pushing back the innovation and creating the innovation. And I think that's what we're continuing to see from a learning perspective too.
Guys?
I guess what I would say, like, so we do nothing direct to consumer, so it's all in some sense wholesale. And actually, so we're selling and marketing both to higher ed and to K-12, and the demand dynamics and the things that make for product market fit in some ways are different in that, as we all know, higher ed leaders are very worried about enrollment. They are worried about things that they can fundraise around. K-12, it's not an enrollment crisis. It's a different set of problems. But in some sense, they're all worried about student success. And if you can prove that you can drive student success, especially with populations that they've had trouble with in the past, you get their attention. And I think you mentioned before in the first question to me that sort of alluded to some of the studies that have been done at ASU, and we are seeing really, really dramatic outcomes for students that in the past we've really had a lot of trouble reaching in STEM. So the flagship product for our company essentially replaces an intro biology wet lab for both higher ed and K-12 with, instead of the traditional wet lab experience, a series of immersive experiences that happen in a wild, fantastical sanctuary for the endangered species of the galaxy that was cooked up by our founder, who comes out of Hollywood and worked with Steven Spielberg for many, many years. And the thing that has been most interesting and that is really getting the attention of both K-12 and higher ed when they see it is how much story is driving academic outcomes. The amount of time that students spend in the actual VR part of what we do is like 1/40th of the curriculum time. So for every 10 minutes that they're in VR, they're spending 3 hours in pretty traditional lab environments doing a bunch of hard math and science. But the amount of that math and science that students are willing to do because it's in service of a problem they desperately want to solve, because they have a deep emotional connection to they are a protagonist in the story and to the other characters in this story. So if they have to figure out how to help a bunch of super cute creatures called spotted gliders that are dying of lung cancer live, and then they're willing to spend hours and hours and hours learning how to build predictive models and distributions and statistical analysis around what could conceivably be the contributing factors to that cancer, because they care about the gliders. And this is not like, shouldn't be that surprising to any of us. Like, we all know what inspires us to binge watch television and go to movies and so on. And finally finding ways to bring what we know about what stirs the human soul to institutionalized education is a breakthrough that I think we're sort of on the cusp of, and not because people weren't interested in these things before, but just because the tools weren't so great. Like, people have been trying to do, and Larry has been doing, and we worked together at Amplify for a long time on similar kinds of things, but we're starting to have a set of tools that make the authenticity of that narrative experience just much, much more real and much richer. And so, I guess it's sort of a long-winded way of saying, if you can, so at ASU, and it's now been almost 10,000 students, what was a sort of 40 to 45% achievement gap between the highest performing students and the lowest performing, so highest performing demographic groups and the lowest performing demographic groups in intro biology is now about a 4% difference. And it's almost doubled the number of students that are getting an A in what is a much more academically rigorous program than business as usual. And when you put those kinds of numbers in front of whether it's a superintendent, a school principal, the president or provost of a highly selective university, a community college, system leader, you're in a conversation, because that's what they're in the business of first and foremost.
Storytelling that works. So back to just for Ulrik and for Adeel, the wholesale retail, like Ulrik, you have seen a lot of models work and a lot of models fail, right? Help this audience think through, we're coming out of the pandemic, things are different. We all know it in our gut, we know it in our brains, we know it every which way. How do we navigate this stuff? And we're in the United States, and so we're not going to get rid of 14,000 school superintendents, or we're not going to get rid of 50 state superintendents. How do you navigate those gating items and even on the higher ed piece, state systems, et cetera? How do we make this stuff scale and do it in a speedy fashion?
So the last thing Alan said before we walked in here, please say something we've not heard before. So I'd like to start a tangential part to that. So what just said, unfortunately, has been said 25 years in a row, which is, we've made this thing, we made it work for 10,000 people, like, it's super exciting and people get completely immersed. The new thing we need to prove is that we can do it again and again and again. I think DARPA alone has funded the first 5 dozens of projects that did this, where people are like, wow, look at this simulation, battlefield simulation, this, that, and the other. We've done it in healthcare, we've done it in so many places. So the big challenge we have ahead of us is, how do we find something that works over time? How do we find something that we can, as an industry, as a part of the world, actually sustain? And I think it leads to maybe the answer to your question, or a comment to your question at least, which, and I'll start it a slightly different way again. I spoke to a financial institution, one of the largest in the world recently, and it's not the one represented in the room. And they said that 100% of their staff was using ChatGPT all the time, as opposed to what you described for teachers, which I think is right. So what is the difference here? I think the difference is that the outcomes for those people who are some of the best investors in the world, some of the best analysts in the world, is that there is a measurable, and there is an agreement about what is the measure of high performance. This directly is linked to what they're being measured on, what success means, how they make more money, how they make better investments, how they deliver better reports on an industry fast. It's super easy for that person employed by that giant bank to say, this is the reason why I should do this and integrate it into my life. That's different for teachers, because we're not looking at the end goal being, how do kids actually engage super enthusiastic in that experiment, and how do they learn those 7 C's from it? It's an intermediate goal of getting through the next lesson. And it's not the teacher's fault, because that's the entire system we've built. But as long as that's the yardstick we're applying, I think we'll run into this problem. So like a huge kudos to Adeel for beginning to teach it systematically, but you're pushing these boulders uphill. We need to figure out, how do we systematically find a way to remove that friction and remove that inertia that goes behind, goes against it. And I think the fundamental thing is, we probably, if we want to look at it a more systematic or systemic, from a more systemic approach, we probably need to figure out, can we measure things differently? Can we find a way to change the magnetic north? so that there is the same reason in education to begin to deploy these things the right way as we see if we take a company where it's very obvious where it applies. Because I agree, it should apply to that, but it doesn't make a teacher, or for that matter, a student meet their immediate goals. And the worst example of that we had was, even for intermediate goals like passing your exam, getting a higher grade, you should think that students would flock towards these solutions. And we built, like I think we're way past 50 million higher education students on LearnSmart and SmartBook now. I don't have the numbers anymore. But even with those kind of very, very clear metrics, like you will pass your exams, you'll get higher grades, students were still saying, but is it assigned? They prioritized the things that were assigned by their professor, which were right in their face. So meaning they were looking at, how do I optimize the next 24 hours, 48 hours? They were not even optimizing for the next 3 to 4 weeks, let alone the next 3 to 4 months to get that grade or pass that exam. So there is a fundamental mind change that I hope is beginning to happening. And a good example would be North Carolina, where they actually, from a state level, coming back to wholesale, has decided, let's try to see if we fundamentally can change the playing field so that these outer boundaries are changed and we change the magnetic north.
So I know we're running out of time. We're going to try and get in 1 or 2 questions, so we'll do sort of lightning rounds. But Adeel, just on that front, again, you are thinking about it from a wholesale and retail. You are going straight to the teachers, and yet you're having to have a business relationship or want to with the school districts. And again, when I'm listening to you and thinking about what seems to be the future, so much of education is peer-to-peer. Talk to us about it, but those are different, talking to the administrators and talking to the teachers, very different audiences.
Yeah, so one thing that brings me some optimism is that we have pretty progressive administrators who are, one thing that's really unique, I think, about this AI moment is that most folks who are in an administrative role or a superintendent, principal, have lived through some of these technological eras. Like, you've been through cell phones, you've been through the internet, and now you're kind of like, okay, like, this is inevitable, it's gonna happen. So, my teachers won't use ChatGPT, but they'll use MagicSchool. I hear that a lot. And I think that my teachers need to learn how to use this. Like, literacy for this is really important. And as part of our thesis is this idea that you can't really create a meaningful experience with artificial intelligence for your students if you as a teacher have never experienced the technology in meaningful ways. So we want folks, just like, I use this example often, that it took like 20 years from like when every professional in the world was using a laptop in their work to schools having one-to-one laptops for kids. And we're gonna start seeing the AIs being used in work regularly, and hopefully that's teachers starting to use it first. And then they're gonna be demanding it for their kids. They're gonna say, well, if I use AI as a work partner, it's helping me in my job, and I'm preparing my students for the future of work. We can argue about the fine details of, when is it introduced? Like, is a calculator introduced in a high school level or later, or whatever it might be. But I think that nobody will argue that if this is gonna be something that we integrate in the future of work, then our students should probably get exposure to it sooner than later. And like, my challenge to any like school district leader is that your seniors, at the very least, they should be using AI now. They will go to college next year, and there'll be a student whose progressive private school decided that they could use AI the entire year, and they're gonna get a really great first draft of their their freshman year English essay, and they're gonna spend all their time making it the best essay ever, and your kid is gonna be sitting there, if you're a school district leader, having never touched it and spending all their time just getting the draft done, and you are putting your kids behind right now, right today. So it needs to start with like your teachers, it needs to start with your students, but like, we can't wait, our kids can't wait. And I think that the only folks who are gonna drive that responsibility are gonna be the leaders of education, so.
So let's do this because we want to be respectful of everyone's time. The clock is ticking. All these folks, part of the great things about GSV is you can mingle afterwards and anytime this evening. We'll do a lightning round and then feel free afterwards to do Q&A with our distinguished panelists. There seems to be a big friction. The world is more anxious and skeptical than ever about all education institutions. K-12, higher ed, it's there. It's deep in our souls. It's everything that was, before the pandemic has been put on steroids. And yet we also have all these tools now, right? Extraordinary tools, more than any other time in the history of civilization. So how do we get that inflection point, that change for both, the wholesale, the retail folks to get comfortable and to do wide scale adoption when we know there's a skepticism, K-12 parents, higher ed students, and yet we've got these amazing tools. So lightning round. Jessica?
These tools are disrupting all of our lives, but they're the very tools that will lead us to the next opportunity. And so it's really about embracing them and making them part of how we continuously upskill throughout our lives.
I mean, to me, I think it's as simple as move the damn needle. Like, if you demonstrate that you can significantly change the trajectories of students or learners, you're doing good in the world and there's a return on the investment. And if we can't, then we're all messing around on the margins and going to conferences and not making a difference.
Okay. Ulrik?
I don't think it's a tool discussion. I think it's a strategic discussion. I think it won't happen just because we try to see if we can sell tool solutions one by one. It's the strategic leadership of organizations, schools, companies that need to decide we're after outcomes, we're not after these intermediate goals. Before that happens, tools means nothing. The tools can deliver, but it's not enough.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's embrace the change and then deal with the fallout. You're gonna have to do it either now or 5 years from now. So like, instead of being on your heels, do it proactively. Know that you're gonna have to figure out things that you didn't know you needed to have answers to before, but take the leap forward. You're either postponing it or you may as well get ahead of it.
So thank you all for giving us a lot of hope. Thank you for all that you do. Let's give a big round of applause for our extraordinary panel.
Thank you.